Sakuga. Literally translating to drawing pictures, it's a word that in Japan refers to animation in general. However, in the West, the word has a specific connotation, referring to a moment when a show or movie's animation just goes nuts. It's a phenomenon that, as well as garnering small but dedicated online community of blogs, boorus, forums, and YouTube channels, has come about due in large part to the anime industry's extensive use of limited animation. Unlike in Western studios, where there's a strong focus on maintaining a certain level of consistency throughout an animated work, anime studios are more willing to vary that consistency to save time, cut costs, and for artistic purposes where possible. It's a tradition that's been around since the start of TV anime, where budgets were so tight they had to resort to extreme measures in order to get things done in a reasonable manner. As the popularity of TV in Japan rose though, so too did the overall budgets and funding for TV projects, including anime, allowing studios to expand their capabilities. However, even nowadays the budgets and schedules that anime studios work with are still quite restrictive. And with the obvious exceptions, most studios are forced to have a new project out every season just to stay afloat, making deadlines even tighter and perpetuating the issue. But that's a discussion for another day. This makes limited animation a necessity for anime production. It's generally easy to spot when you notice frequent uses of long panning shots, dialogue scenes where the only thing that moves is the characters' mouths, and most notably, frame modulation, or more simply, changing the amount of frames used throughout an animation. So instead of having a new drawing for every frame, with the standard frame rate for animation being 24 frames a second, a show may only have a new drawing for every other frame, or even every third frame, as that motion can often be achieved more practically, efficiently, and in some cases more creatively with less frames. This is known as animating on 1s, 2s, and 3s respectively. Only more important cuts are done on 1s to help them stand out and feel more impactful because of that extra fluidity, and it's often these moments that are easy to identify as Sakuga. They are also most often attributed to the key animators of those scenes, given it's the keyframes, the minimum amount of drawings needed to communicate movement, that guide the flow of a shot. However, Sakuga isn't simply an animation done on 1s. There is no strict definition for its Western meaning beyond good animation. For example, Mitsuo Iso is an animator who's worked on various series like Evangelion and Ghost in the Shell, whose animation is known for its heavy emphasis on realistic weight and motion. He treats each drawing as a keyframe in its own right, giving him full control over the detail of his work, which is notable for mixing up the timing of its frames to make the animations even more precise, switching from 2s to 3s to even 4s on the fly. Mitsuo refers to this approach as full limited. Sakuga isn't about frame rate, it's about the moments where an animator is able to utilize their skills and talents to their fullest, whether it be using those extra frames for more impact, or by exploiting every quirk of limited animation to their benefit. There are many ways in which this can be done. Often, these animators have a particular specialization in what they do best, ranging from kinetic action to flashy and grotesque effects work, to character acting so subtle and realistic I was honestly shocked to find out it wasn't rotoscoped. Or maybe what makes them stand out is the specific stylistic tricks they use for their work. Hell, sometimes those tricks end up becoming animation trends in their own right, as everyone tries it out for themselves. Like the Itano Circus, a shot full of dynamic camera work showing lots of projectiles flying all over the place, as a character outmaneuvers them. That was first done by Ichiro Itano, who originally implemented it into his work on the Macross series. It's usually because of these specializations that some animators are brought onto a show, so they can flex their creative muscles with particular scenes and cuts the directors think they'd be a perfect fit for. And that's why any of this matters in the first place. In any animated work, the animation is another layer of artistry that adds to its experience, and in the best ones, is inseparable from it. It's what gets our blood pumping as we watch giant robots fight for the sake of the universe, fills us with joy when the protagonist finally achieves their goal, and breaks our heart when we watch that character find a loved one's last message. These moments are brought to life by their animation. And nowhere else do I think this is better shown than in a little series you might have heard of called Mob Psycho 100. Mob Psycho 100 is an anime based on the manga of the same name by One, creator of the original webcomic for One Punch Man. It follows Shigeo Kageyama, an average middle schooler with a tremendous lack of personality, thus the nickname Mabu, or background character, and immense psychic powers who works for the shady greatest psychic of the 21st century, Arataka Reagan, to help unsuspecting customers with supernatural dilemmas. The show's art immediately stands out for its crude and less polished aesthetic. It's heavily based on one's own art style, which can easily be seen as amateurish, but Yuzuru Tachikawa, the anime's director, explained that when reading through the manga he couldn't shake how eccentric it was, and wanted to keep that spirit in the adaptation. Even one has commented on the appeal of his art, saying, "At the time there were lots of people imitating popular manga, trying to make pictures that were likely to sell, so I guess because of that I stood out from the pack." The staff shared their sentiment, with many being quite fond of one's style, and were excited to work with his designs, with one of the main key animators, Yoshimichi Kameda, well known for his cuts on the Full Metal Alchemist franchise, refusing to work as chief animation director specifically so he could work on the animation itself. One's aesthetic is inseparable from the story, and so the staff did their best to stay as faithful to it as they could, and it's one that only seemed to work in their favour. Its inherent roughness lets the animators get away with being more loose with the animation, as people are more easily able to accept some imperfections. They don't need to worry about maintaining every little detail of the models and can redirect their focus on the motion, leading to more dynamic animation which, while obvious in the fight scenes, since, fucking look at this shit, I feel are more effective in the simpler moments. The snappy and erratic movements of Reigen's many gesticulations are rendered with amazing detail thanks to a clever use of well-timed smears, and Mob's struggles in the Body Improvement Club are emphasized by the jumpy motion of his exhausted run cycle, which sometimes even runs on lower frames as if he's being drained of drawings as well as stamina, which is a fun detail to notice when you realize how it slowly smooths out over time to show how, well, his body has improved. The bigger focus on motion over detail adds to the strength of the show's animation. It also lends itself to more experimentation with the show's visuals, something I feel has become more apparent in the second season. Many reaction shots switch medium to sell an expression better, whether it be with pencil on paper, off-model sketches, or by just distorting the actual dimensions of the image on screen. Miyasato, one of the show's animators, has even implemented a few sand animations into it for an existentially painful moment or two. Speaking of Miyasato, her use of paint-on-glass animation has become a hallmark of Mob Psycho 100's presentation. Its thick, textured look seems so unnatural and ethereal when contrasted against its usual 2D look. It's otherworldly, a perfect fit for the show's host of lingering spirits and occult subjects. At the same time, that texture can also give an odd sense of authenticity or even nostalgia to some scenes. It makes it feel more real and is implemented incredibly well for various flashbacks, as well as the ED of the first season. The show has even managed to slip in a few video game references every now and then, with the second season switching to a fighting game format for one particular battle, and even uses just straight up pixel art for a few cuts, and are all implemented without any of them feeling out of place. The show's rough look means that it doesn't need to adhere to any specific stylization, giving its animators a lot more room to click together seemingly disparate tricks and techniques into its overall look. As Tachikawa has said, it's very receptive to new visual ideas. More than just being neat technical tomfoolery, however, the artwork is used to great effect to establish the tone and atmosphere of the series. The show's quirky look adds to its comedic nature by making it all seem that much goofier than it already is. But at the same time, it's not so ridiculous that it lacks any sense of weight, whether it be for emotional character moments or to emphasize the darker side to its world, with many of its animation techniques playing into that sense of unnerving unreality. One that's particularly noteworthy is the effects work by Keiichiro Watanabe, who renders spirits with these distorted shapes and tendrils, whose erratic yet fluid movement is macabre and in some cases almost demonic. The obsession of the stalker with his neighbor in Season 2 Episode 3 is too creepy to put into words, as so Shin Ogasawara used the uncomfortable closeness of the camera and oddly uncanny animation to make our skin crawl. Much of the camera work and framing throughout Episode 2 of the same season is done at tilted angles, creating a strong sense of unease as it goes on, playing into the ominous nature of this city riddled with urban legends lurking around every corner. Even something as small as the fact that the lines are dark green instead of black only adds to the supernatural tone of the series, given how often green is associated with the supernatural. The artwork is an invaluable asset to establishing the tone and atmosphere of Mob Psycho 100's story, and just as the show establishes the feelings of a scene, so too do its animators just as easily convey the feelings of its characters. With grandiose imagery or minor movements and gestures, there are plenty of moments that tell us so much with so little. I think the best examples of this come from the show's main duo, whose respective characterization are able to show this in equally opposite ways. Mob is a quiet kid who lacks presence, with everything about his design and movement done to make him seem as dull as possible, Ironically, it's because of his naturally blank state that even subtler signs of emotion end up standing out the strongest. It's easy to notice when he hesitates, to see his hands shake or tighten up, or see his head tilt in such a way as to hint at something stronger bubbling away beneath the surface. And when he finally does burst as his powers reach 100% and he can't hold them back anymore, it's only fitting that everything about his character ends up coming to life alongside it, including his expressions. Meanwhile, on the exact opposite side of things, Reagan, as mentioned before, moves with snappy and precise movements that emphasize his limitless well of confidence and personality, whilst the frequent use of sketchy drawings for them show, well, that's kind of self-explanatory. Through Reagan's animation alone, we're able to understand him as a pinnacle of shady charisma. It's also because of this that when he does slow down, taking a breather after a long day of work, we know he's drained. Or after spending just a few seconds too long staring at an email, that we know a nerve has been struck. Mob and Reagan's respective animations not only give us a strong impression of their character, but also communicate their inner thoughts and feelings in creative and subtle ways by using that initial understanding to its advantage. The ability to communicate the emotions of a scene and character through visuals is a part of what makes Mob Psycho 100 so strong as a series, as it takes full advantage of its medium wherever it can to enhance the impact of its narrative. And I think the best example of this can be found in episode 5 of season 2, an episode that can accurately be described as a Sakuga mindfuck, and whose story only works as well as it does because of its animation. In this episode, Mogami, an evil psychic turned powerful spirit that's possessed the body of a young girl named Minami, traps Mob in an artificial reality where he was born without psychic powers, to show him how cruel people can really be. Very shortly in, we get an immediate change of pace from what we're used to, with its bright and vibrant colours going dull, and the screen changing to a different aspect ratio, leaving us with these thick black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. It's almost surreal, and emphasises how trapped and isolated Mob is in this depressing new world, where he's harassed and attacked relentlessly, where the idea of hope has literally been pushed into the background. Mob is often surrounded by cruelty, with most shots surrounding him with the very students who bully him. The animation can often be rough and jagged, especially the scene in which Mob is beaten up beside the bridge, done by Moang, again emphasizing the brutal nature of this reality. There's another moment done by Yasunori Miyazawa, after Minami spills milk all over Mob, where the visuals become abstracted and Mob shrinks away as the former bodies of the students entangle and surround him, showing how small Mob feels, and how overwhelming this situation is for him. It's an episode whose entire look has shifted to hit home the depressing state of Mob's circumstances. Equally as grim is Mogami's backstory, which makes use of all kinds of twisted and terrifying techniques to emphasize the feelings of dread, loss, and spite that fuel his destructive quest. But at the same time, that new aspect ratio gives it all a cinematic feel. It draws our attention to the fact that we're watching all this happen through a cinematic lens, a perspective manufactured for a narrative. At the start of the episode, there's a shot of a raven where the camera focuses on its eyes, which reflect the world in front of it, and looks upward to another cityscape lingering overhead. The implication is that we are watching these events from a specific point of view. This isn't reality, but someone's interpretation of it. Specifically Mogami's, given he built this world. And from a meta standpoint, implies that the idea of the world being inherently cruel is indeed one perspective among many. Once Mob realizes this, after Dimple manages to sneak into this reality and remind Mob of his normal life, he not only becomes more grateful, now realizing how lucky he is to know the people he knows and be in the position he's in, but also is able to fight back against Mogami's manipulation, as well as the many spirits he's absorbed over the decades, with the strength of a 100% burst in courage, which also comes with a burst in animation. Now, I can point out the stark use of color contrast between the harsh reds of the evil spirits and the blindingly bright blues and purples of Mob's powers, which is only made more intense by the grey and dour colors of the background. I could point out the unbelievable amount of compositing and background work this half of the episode must have required. I could mention the sheer scale of the whole thing, in terms of the literal dimensions of the world and spirits, or in how many spirits were animated in any given cut, or even just how long this level of animation lasts for, given its 10 to 11 straight minutes of visual spectacle. I can mention the heavy use of effects, some of the more fascinatingly animated segments, such as the combat by Hakuyugo, or Naoki Miyajima, or this moment by Toya Oshima, or more of that twistedly demonic morphing by Keiichiro Watanabe, or any of the other amazing cuts by the many animators who worked on this. Or I could even mention that this was the first episode the staff worked on for the series, and was finished by August of 2018, having been given plenty of time to work on it. Maybe pointing out how Mob Psycho 100's longer and better planned schedule is a big part of why the animation looks so good, because of how much time the animators have to work on and polish off their animations, but I feel like there's little I could say about this half of the episode, except for that last bit, that simply showing the animation wouldn't be able to say. And I guess that's kind of the point. This entire half of the episode is about Mob having the courage to both be optimistic and stand up for himself and others in the face of overwhelming odds. And the best way to represent that is to let the animators go just as nuts as Mob's emotions. But for me, the most impactful moment of the whole episode comes near the end, after everything's been said and done, when Minami thanks Mob for saving her and breaks down as she realizes just how badly she treated him in that fake reality. However, Mob forgives her, because despite her actions, he believes that she, and anyone for that matter, can change if given the chance. It's a heartwarming scene that cuts right to the core of what makes Mob as a character and the series as a whole resonate so strongly. Its wholehearted faith in people and their ability to do better. Which is ironic since the animator who did the scene, Toshiyuko Sato, certainly had a change of pace, given he's more so known for his chaotic animations. But his skills translate over to this moment of character acting pretty well. The animation is rough, jittery, and almost raw, making all the little shakes of its lines feel like genuine trembles of emotion and exhaustion from its characters, which, after everything that's just happened, would only be natural. It perfectly encapsulates the feelings of the scene and elevates them. This episode exemplifies why Sakuga is so crucial to Mob Psycho 100, because more than just being about it having good animation, it lets its animators use their skills to draw out the emotions of every cut they work on in their own unique ways to make them all the more impactful, which works quite well when you consider the overall story of Mob Psycho 100. As we learned from Mogami in the previous episode, the strength of one's psychic powers are directly tied to one's emotions. As such, Mob's powers are a metaphor for his emotions, and how he deals with them, by bottling them up and restraining himself from showing them out of fear that he may hurt someone, as he nearly did when he tried to protect his brother from bullies when they were younger, or worse, being ostracized for them, until they can't be contained anymore. In this sense, the growth he goes through in slowly learning how to open up about his thoughts and feelings, and as such better connecting with those around him, is an unsubtle allegory for a teenage kid learning how to express themselves. Hell, the show outright says this.
人に感情を伝えられるところだ。それはどんなに取り繕った言葉よりも響く。
That idea gets even more interesting when you take one's artistic journey into account alongside it. One has always had a love of art, drawing whatever wild characters and jokes that came to mind as much as he could. However, he was often afraid of looking uncool if people found out he was interested in art, instead of, say, soccer or video games. And so he did his best to keep it to himself and a secret from others, especially from his parents, who often scolded him when they found him doodling. According to one, what hurt the most wasn't getting chewed out for goofing off, rather it was having something I loved to do be rejected. It would only be later in life, as he discovered the internet and many communities of like-minded artists, that he began to open up to others about his interest by posting webcomics online. But in 2010, due to personal issues, he had to take a hiatus, something that he describes as being a personal hell, with his job at the time being too demanding for him to do anything creative. I passed each day with no time to express all the story ideas that popped into my head. I decided to give it a real shot rather than just gloomily go on working my whole life. Though I doubt that Mob Psycho 100 was directly based on his experiences, I wouldn't be surprised if it influenced the way in which he approached it. Mob Psycho 100, both in its presentation and narrative, is a story all about the importance of self-expression, and that encapsulates the core appeal and strength of Sakuga. That animation is all about expression, whether it be in the emotions of a scene or the skills of the animator who drew it, and, unsurprisingly, reaches its fullest potential when those animators are able to express themselves. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Or for a bit more simplified approach for this one, because I feel like I've been getting a bit too ambitious with my vids lately and it's been screwing their overall quality. So I want to polish off the basics a bit, work on my edits, strengthen my writing, etc. But this was still a nightmare, mostly just because my schedule has been quite hectic recently, so it was hard finding time to work on it, which was not helped by how big it got. I'll spare the obvious joke there. Like, I posted about it on Twitter, the first draft was 9,000 words, which would have meant like a fucking 45-50 minute video, and my notes document for it was about 60 pages before I even started planning it, so Yeah, there's a lot to work with this one. The main part of that was from having a lot of stuff about anime production and the anime industry, which were only kinda tangentially related, so we cut it to focus the writing. Especially since a lot of the shit with the industry was about stuff that is serious enough to need its own dedicated video to properly discuss it, instead of just slapping it on to the end of something else, you know? And like I said, I do plan on making that video at some point, once I do more research, so look forward to that, I guess. Though outside of that, it was fun learning about Sakuga, which if you're curious about, as always, sources, links, and further reading in the description. And I got an excuse to talk about my favorite anime, so it worked out well. Although, another depressing point about this, I'm recording this on the day the whole Article 13 thing got passed by the fucking EU Parliament, so yeah, that's gonna put a dent in video making things. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree, if you're a part of the Sakuga community, who your favorite animator is, etc. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, check out my last video, where I talk about the odd quirks of pixel art's aesthetic and techniques that make it so appealing to so many, myself included. Or check out my video on Captain Christian and the joy that comes from learning about the process behind the media we love. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe to come fly with me. You can also follow me on Twitter for more updates on this channel and other stuff, and hopefully, I'll see you later.